I want to go over some of the things to avoid. Some things that do-it-yourselfers tend to do that they really should not do, and they actually create a lot more work for themselves. Well, I understand your thinking on that, but when you remove that plate, it's very dangerous. The other thing not to do, don't get your wire cutters, your cable cutters, and cut your cables on the sides. Hi, this is Travis with Parts for Garage Doors. Today we're going to talk about what to do when your garage door comes off track or crooked. This can be very frustrating because it's going to be hard to open your door. It's going to be hard to close your door. The one thing that you may be tempted to do is to force it open or force it closed. Definitely don't do that. So today we're not going to give you a step-by-step guide how to fix an off-track or crooked garage door, but we are going to give some tips, some helpful tips to get you started, and also some things to avoid during the process. Make sure you don't do these things. So there are a few common reasons why a garage door will come off track or go crooked. One of the primary reasons is having your garage door opener set to open your door too high. So the higher the garage door goes open, the more the spring runs out of turns. And when it's completely ran out of turns, there's nothing to hold the cables tight. What will happen eventually is that one of those cables on one side or the other will jump over the cable drum and get tangled up in the torsion tube. That will basically seize the door from moving on one side and cause the door to shift and go crooked. Another thing that can happen is if you pull the rope and you're operating the door by hand, whether the power goes out or maybe you don't have a garage door opener, if a young person or anybody comes and pulls the door open, pushes it open really fast, the cable drum can't reel in that cable quick enough, and what will happen is it'll get tangled. So you want to make sure that if you ever operate the door by hand, that you lift the door open slow and smooth. One of the more common reasons as well is if the door comes down on an object, maybe a trash can or a box. Maybe the kids are playing in the garage and then all of a sudden somebody hits the garage door remote and that door is trying to close but hits a box on one side and just momentarily causes the cable to go slack on the other side, and it can also jump the drum and get tangled up in the tube. So you want to be careful to keep the area clear near your garage door, near the corners. Make sure that something doesn't get pushed under there just by mistake. But if the settings are correct on your garage door opener, the force setting will cause the door to stop when it hits an object and it won't keep pushing down. But if it did keep pushing down on one side onto a box or an object, that's what's going to cause that cable to go slightly loose. The fourth reason why a door can go crooked or come off track would be if the garage door spring is running out of tension. Maybe you have an older garage door spring, maybe it's rusty, maybe it's 15, 20 years old. Well, the tension that's on that spring can wear out over time. So as the door lifts, it's not providing as much tension on the top end. That allows the cables to, you guessed it, jump off the drum and get tangled up. So the other thing to be careful of is when you're installing a new garage door spring, you have to have enough turns on that spring, because if it runs out of turns, it's not going to hold the cables tight. So on a 7-foot tall door, you need to have 29 or 30 quarter turns. On an 8-foot tall door, you need to have 33 or 34 quarter turns. So those are some of the primary reasons why it happens. And usually it just happens in a small measure, just go slightly crooked in the beginning. But what happens is people continue to press their remote control or their wall control button over and over, thinking that it's going to correct itself. Well, that doesn't happen. Usually, once a cable comes out of position on the drum or gets tangled, the door is basically going to be stopped and frozen on one side. It won't be able to move anymore. And the more you press the wall button or the more you try to force it closed, the worse it's going to get. So you've got your garage door. It's running within parallel tracks, and if it goes slightly crooked, it's going to be pushing the track on one side and then the opposite corner also pushing the track. The more you move it up or down, the more it bends the track. And also on the opposite corners, you'll have the rollers popping out. Don't move the door when it goes slightly crooked because it's an easy fix in the beginning. But the more you mess with it and the worse it gets, obviously, the more repair might be needed. You might need to replace your track. You might completely mess up your cables because they get all crimped. So just do yourself a favor. And when your door goes slightly crooked, that's when you address the problem. You stop, don't hit the wall button, don't pull the pull rope and start pushing it up manually or pulling it up manually. Don't do that. So what you're going to want to do is listen to some of the tips that I have for you. Before I give you some basic tips, I want to go over some of the things to avoid. Some things that do-it-yourselfers tend to do that they really should not do, and they actually create a lot more work for themselves. The first tip would be do not take the bottom plate, the bottom fixture that holds that bottom roller. Do not unscrew that, because people think, well, that's what the cable's attached to, and if I loosen that, then maybe I can get the door, which is stuck, kind of back in the right position. Well, I understand your thinking on that, but when you remove that plate, it's very dangerous because it could be under an immense amount of tension. And I have seen where that last screw comes out, it comes shooting up and hitting somebody in the face, the head, the forehead. I have seen blood on the floor before as a technician because somebody tried to do that exact thing. And it is very common thinking, well, I'm just going to detach those bottom plates. That's going to help me out so I can upright everything and make it square again. But that's not needed. So please don't do that. Don't take those bottom plates off. The other thing not to do, don't get your wire cutters, your cable cutters, and cut your cables on the sides. Cutting the cables doesn't make the repair any easier, so it's really not necessary. So the other thing not to do, which we did mention briefly, is don't manually try to force the door. The more you try to force it open or force it closed, the more you're gonna bend the track, and it's gonna be a lot more to repair. So now I'm going to try to give you some pro tips on how you can upright your crooked garage door. So the first thing you want to do is pop as many rollers back into place as possible, especially the ones that go overhead. You may have 2 panels down and 2 panels up. You want to get as many rollers back in place as possible. The next thing you need is to have 3 vice grips. They need to be locking vice grips that can lock into the track and can also lock the torsion tube down. So after putting in as many rollers as possible, the next thing you're going to do is look at your garage door. It's going to be crooked. You're going to have one high side and one low side. Whatever is the high side, you're going to take a vice grip above one of the rollers, either the very bottom roller or the next one up, and you're going to clamp it into the track in such a way that it keeps the roller from going up. After placing that vice grip, go to the other side and lift up the door slightly, just an inch at a time, and you're going to see how the door shifts, and it's actually going to upright itself as you pull up the other side. Have that other vice grip handy and place it under one of the rollers there. So you may just need to go up an inch or two, then take a look above and see if you can pop another roller in place, go another inch or two, clamp it back, look to see if you can put a roller in place. The object is to first get all the rollers in place so that that's all secure up above, and then to obviously upright the door. When it's level, you're going to set the vice grip below one of the rollers. So after uprighting the door, now we need to adjust the elephant in the room, which is the cable that is tangled up. So you're going to need another set of vice grips to be able to lock down the torsion tube. So go over to the side of the door that has the cable tangled up, get your ladder completely off into the corner, and hopefully you have room to kind of climb up there and get your body over the track to take a look at the cable drum. What you're going to do is put the vice grip under the torsion tube, clamping into the torsion tube, outside of the drum, outside of the bearing bracket, and then into the wall on the bottom side. And so what that's basically doing is just kind of holding what was the tension on that cable. Now the vice grip is taking some of that tension. Okay, now what you're going to do is take a 12.7/16 socket to loosen those 2 set screws. You can also use an open-ended 3/8 crescent wrench to loosen those 2 set screws. As you loosen those screws, you'll be able to manually twist and turn the cable drum to allow some slack in the cable that's all tangled up. And what you're going to want to do is just move it enough to pop the cable out from inside that slot and then untangle the cable. After you've untangled the cable, make sure there's no kinks in the cable. If there's some slight kinks, you might need to kind of tweak it to straighten it out. And then you're going to load the cable back up into the cable drum. You can look at the one on the other side and kind of follow the pattern and see how it goes. But basically, it's just going to go line by line inside the drum and get wrapped up, and then hold that cable drum tight and tighten the 2 set screws. Okay, so you got the cable set in the cable drum. It's now time to take off the vice grip from the torsion tube, and then take the 2 vice grips off from the track. And then it's time to test the door up and down manually. You're going to lift it up slowly. Don't use the garage door opener. Just manually lift it up slowly, inch by inch, making sure that nothing's scraping, that it feels like it's going up smoothly. Test it by hand and go all the way up. It should be able to stay in the open position right at the header height when you let go. If it does not and it wants to creep down, then you will want to have a spring adjustment, adding a couple turns to the springs. Don't do that unless you research how to do that. You can watch one of our videos to learn how to add tension to a garage door spring. After lifting the garage door up, go ahead and close the door all the way and take a look at the bottom and see if there's any daylight showing at the bottom of the garage door. If there's light on one side, then you can do a very easy cable adjustment. Use one of those vice grips, plant it back on the low side of the torsion tube, take your 12.7/16 socket, loosen the 2 set screws on the drum, just slowly, very, very slowly loosen it, and you will actually see the drum kind of rotate under tension. It'll still be under tension, but it's going to rotate a little bit to set the door down. You'll see the daylight disappear, and then you're going to hold it and tighten those 2 set screws. So that's what you would do if you see a little daylight on one side. I sincerely hope that these tips have been helpful. Thank you so much for watching our Parts for Garage Doors channel. Don't forget to subscribe and like this video. We always like to remind you to do something good for somebody else today. And as always, we'll see you next time.